The NFL Combine is now behind us. So let's take a look at some of the players that won the NFL Combine or even lost based on their performance this week, or really even lack of performance this week. And I'm going to kick things off, Justin, with probably my favorite prospect in this entire draft class. I'm not saying he's the best prospect in this whole class, but he's probably my favorite. And that is Omarion Hampton, running back out of North Carolina. He is just, this kid's just an absolute stud, dude. He ran a mid 4.40 at 221 pounds. That is a 112 speed score. Absolutely fantastic. And actually, just for fun, here's every single drafted top 50 running back since 2016 with a 110 or higher speed score. Derrick Henry, Zeke Elliott, Joe Mixon, Leonard Fournette, Rashad Penny is in there. What could have been? Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, Jahmyr Gibbs, most likely Omarion Hampton. And if you filter that down to just top 25 overall drafted running backs, so in the first round, but in that first 25 picks, it's just Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, Leonard Fournette, and Ezekiel Elliott. I'm actually past the point right now of I wouldn't be surprised if he was a first rounder. Like I thought before the combine that he could have snuck into the first round. But now after this combine performance, I fully expect Omarion Hampton to be a first round pick. He's my RB1 in my marker system right now. Really, that's just because Genty didn't test. Had Genty actually tested, he would have been the RB1. So I'm sure that after his pro day, if he does run, he'll just climb back to RB1 in my marker system. But as of right now, it's Omarion Hampton. He is very easily my rookie RB2. And I don't even think it's that close with anybody else once you factor in draft capital. It's Genty, it's Omarion Hampton, everybody else.
Yeah, you and I have been on the same page, I think, since we did a mock draft back in December. Hampton has been our clear-cut 2. And look, a lot of running backs help themselves during the combine. Mm-hmm. I think few help themselves as much as Omarion Hampton. There's already the reports out there that some scouts, whatever this truly means, who knows, but some scouts have Hampton ahead of Genty, and he's their RB1. Look, neither of us are going that far, but I get it. If you are a diehard, RAS, relative athletic score believer, he put up the 14th best RAS by a running back of all time. 14th out of 1,909. And I think this kind of dispels the notion that he's a plotter, that he's maybe doesn't have that extra gear, because that's what some people were kind of saying about him. He's a great second back because he doesn't have that extra gear. That's clearly not the case. And maybe he doesn't necessarily show it on tape all the time, but in the underwear Olympics, he shows it. And you can't get too high based on combine results, but it's really hard not to just be all in on Hampton right now. So he's a massive winner coming out of the combine. Switching though from a player I think we are both obsessed with in Hampton, let's take a look at another winner at the wide receiver position. I want to talk about Matthew Golden. Now, truthfully, up front, I don't think either of us are crazy about Matthew Golden just as a whole. But coming out of the combine, look, speed kills. People lose their mind when players run fast. That's exactly what Matthew Golden did. He runs a 4.29. He shows the speed, and now there is this hype or this swell of he's the wide receiver 1, right? Mike Tannenbaum even put a quote out there basically saying he's talked to scouts saying Golden is the no doubt wide receiver 1 in this draft class now because of that combine time. And look, I do want to pump the brakes, even though he comes out as a winner here. Just because you are fast does not mean really anything. All of these players are fast. They're incrementally slower, potentially. But what Matthew Golden did needs to show up on tape. And I haven't seen it that way. And that's why you always still have to take 40 times and 3 cone drills, all these things, with a grain of salt. Undoubtedly, on paper, he helps himself. It's not really moving the needle for me just yet, though, in terms of overall prospect rankings.
Yeah, I don't like Matthew Golden a lot either. I have all these notes written out on Matthew Golden. He's definitely, I write notes for every single player that we're going to talk about, but he's by far the one that I just went on an absolute bananas tangent on all of this.
Do it.
Yeah, on Saturday, basically as a reaction to the 40 time and everybody, saying that, oh, Matthew Golden did this, blah, blah, he's phenomenal. I basically tweeted out, first thing I said about Matthew Golden was, I'm so glad that he's getting so much hype because that means I'm going to get somebody better than him, cheaper than him in rookie drafts. Like, I don't get the hype at all, and I'm glad that you're on board with it. He's fast. He played for Texas. Everybody now thinks that he's basically Xavier Worthy, except Xavier Worthy actually had production at Texas. And you can't even use the quarterback argument. I've seen a lot of people say, well, Quinn Ewers sucked, so that's why Matthew Golden didn't have any production. Well, Xavier Worthy had Quinn Ewers for quarterback and produced with Quinn Ewers and with Adonai Mitchell, a second-round wide receiver on the opposite side of him. He doesn't have a season over 2 yards per team pass attempt. His best season from a market share of yards standpoint was 22%. That's terrible. He averaged under 55 yards per game over his entire career. And then the real nail in the coffin for me was Scott Barrett kind of went out also kind of on a tangent against Golden and Isaiah Bond, the other Texas wide receiver. And he tweeted out a list of first-round wide receivers to average under 85 yards per game in their best season in college. The list is John Ross, Brashad Perriman, Jalen Reagor, Quentin Johnston, Xavier Worthy, so there is that, Kelvin Benjamin, Calvin Ridley, Philip Dorsett, Henry Ruggs, and then probably Matthew Golden because he probably is going to be a first-round pick. I think he solidified himself a top 15 or top 20 draft capital. But that is the list. I mean, people are going to point to Calvin Ridley. They're going to point to Xavier Worthy as hits from that list, but the other 80% of them are some of the biggest busts in recent history. And Calvin Ridley and Xavier Worthy were both much better prospects than Matthew Golden are right now. And honestly, there's an argument that Matthew Golden is the worst analytical prospect out of everybody on that entire list. You look at my marker system, he is so bad in my marker system. It's unbelievable. And I even have a draft capital adjustment after the fact, add an added boost for first round wide receivers. If you give him an added boost of first round wide receivers, he would, in order to surpass Tet McMillan or surpass Luther Burden or surpass Jayden Higgins in my market system after the adjustment, they would have to be day 3 picks. That's how bad Matthew Golden is and how low he is on the rankings, even after adjusting for the first round draft capital. It's so utterly bad for Matthew Golden.
Yeah, I mean, look, the production is a glaring issue. And if you go watch the wide receiver video that's, I think, probably already out, where I did my updated top 5, your production is one of the things I care about the most. Because look, if you are not dominating in college to some extent on your own roster over the course of your career, especially if you are a guy that has transferred, right? You didn't even play in the SEC every season and you're still not putting up elite production, that is a problem. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, again, he is fast as hell. And maybe that is enough for him. But yeah, I mean, it's that list you laid out is a bunch of guys. If you guys have been watching this channel for the longest time now, where it's been both Addison and myself, that is a bunch of players we have just routinely stayed away from. That list is full of guys that you and I have just never been on board with. And Golden kind of falls into that category. Now, this has fully gotten away from us as, yes, he's a winner. So congrats, Matthew Golden, on the winner. I still don't love the long-term outcome here.
Yeah. The final thing that I will say on Golden here is that I did add a new marker system that looks at Pro Football Focus metrics. It's basically a new set of markers and baselines from PFF metrics, looking at these wide receivers on a per route basis, running those baselines through them. I've kind of called it the Ladd McConkey list because he's actually the reason that I added that this year, because McConkey was just way better on a per route basis than he was actual production. And I think that that's translated very well to an NFL level so far. And that was one of the biggest areas that everybody pointed out. It was like, oh, all you got to do is watch the tape on Ladd. All you got to do is watch the tape. Look at his reception perception. Look at all this stuff. He was playing at Brock Bowers. I understand all of those arguments a lot more because of these PFF markers. And out of 16 PFF markers that I have, Matthew Golden hits on 4 of them, 25%. Ladd McConkey hit on over 10 of them. Matthew Golden hits on only 4. There are 35 wide receivers in this class who have hit on more PFF markers than Matthew Golden. One of them is actually Isaiah Bond. But I will say, though, that I do prefer Matthew Golden a lot more over Isaiah Bond. Of the two Texas receivers this year, I really don't want either, but I would much, much prefer Matthew Golden. I mean, Bond is everything that Matthew Golden is, except smaller, slower, and with worse production. So really no thank you to Isaiah Bond. I would put him down as a loser from the NFL Combine to where Golden is a winner, but I really just don't want either of those guys. Let's just move away from the Texas wide receivers. Let's look at another winner from the NFL Combine. I want to talk about Jayden Higgins, the wide receiver out of Iowa State. I mean, from a Combine perspective, he way over exceeded my expectations. I actually highlighted him in a video last week talking about 5 sleepers that I'm looking for, and trying to watch at the NFL Combine. I had Jayden Higgins in that video, and at the time I was comping him to like Michael Thomas, Allen Robinson, because I was looking at 40 times with, the size that Higgins at least was listed as at Iowa State, and Michael Thomas and Allen Robinson were running high 4.5s. A-Rob actually ran a 4.6. That's kind of where I pegged Jayden Higgins to be. Now, he came out, he ran a 4.47 at 214 pounds, 6'4". That's pretty incredible. Hey, but he has a 130 burst score as well, 39-inch vertical, 10.8 on the broad jump. That is pretty incredible stuff from a wide receiver as big as Jayden Higgins is. I am a massive fan of Jayden Higgins. I'd rather have him than Matthew Golden in this rookie class. And I'm just going to be so happy that I can get him in the second round. I'm going to be targeting him in the second round of every single rookie draft that I'm possibly in. Yeah,
Jayden Higgins, like the scouting report on him coming into the Combine is this slowish, kind of tall slot wide receiver, that doesn't have the burst or the speed that you're going to want at the next level to really have him be like that successful power slot, or even, give some flexibility outside. The Combine sort of dispels that notion. Now, this always goes back to, like, you have to show it on tape as well. Same thing with Golden. Like, he doesn't show 4.2 speed on tape. Higgins has not shown this kind of speed. It is great to see it and know that he has it in his bag, but at some point it has to show up. So, look, he is a winner. He has moved up my rankings. He's inside of my top 10. I'm not as all in on Higgins as you are, but I still think I'm ahead of consensus, so I'll take that as a winner. But he's one of those kind of sleepy, under-the-radar winners that not enough people, I think, have been really hyping up or gassing up coming out of the Combine, just because he really flipped that scouting report on its head. Going back to the loser side of the Combine, though, I think one that is probably going to pop up on most videos, most lists, is Tez Johnson. And look, at face value, Tez Johnson's numbers are fine. Right? Running 4.5 as wide receiver is not the end of the world. Obviously, a phenomenal shuttle, phenomenal 3-cone. Those things are great. But the issues come in when you factor in the size. He's 154 pounds. He doesn't have the height to be, an imposing wide receiver by any stretch of the imagination. And really what factors down here is his speed score coming out of this because of his size is, historically bad. I am talking one of the worst of all time. Like, I am using Addison's master prospect sheet here. You have, 1,172 players on this list?
Yep.
Okay. Tez Johnson's speed score, 74.4, is 1,167th out of 1,172 players on this list. That is exceptionally bad. And even if we just filter this group down to under 80, right? Let's give a little leeway, a little bit of room north, a little bit of room south. Let's go through the players on this list because it is, I think, the funniest list I've ever read. So this year, it's Tez Johnson. It's also Josh Kelly, who still had a higher speed score than Tez Johnson. If you're not sure who he is, don't worry. We're in the same boat. He's in this draft class. I've never heard his name.
He was at the Combine. That's all I know about it.
He showed up at the Combine. Good for Josh Kelly, not to disparage him. He's, has a higher speed score than 75. Not everybody can say that. But after him, you have Tyler Vaughns, Javon Durante, Trent Taylor, who's a name most people would know, Drew Morgan, DeMarcus Ayers, Josh Stewart, Ace Sanders, Patrick Edwards, Vincent Brown, Jonathan Smith. And if you're thinking, who the hell are these people? You're not alone. That's fine. Nobody knows who they are because they never did anything at the next level that was relative for fantasy or relevant for fantasy. So look, this is not the nail in the coffin. This is not the end all be all. And I'm sure Addison is going to have some very positive notes on Tez Johnson to sort of pull us back. But at face value, coming out of the combine, that really feels like it's as bad of an outcome as you could have had.
Yeah, I remember there was a quote that I saw. I don't know if it was from some guy at like PFF for a scout or something like that, said that basically his combine gives him an undrafted profile. Essentially, that's what just happened to Tez Johnson. Like nobody's stock got hit harder than Tez Johnson with a potential undrafted. And I mean, it works. Like of that whole entire list that you're looking at, like basically everybody in there is undrafted. There's a couple 7th rounders, a 4th and a 5th. Vincent Brown was a 3rd rounder back in 2011. But basically the majority of those guys are undrafted wide receivers. So yeah, that is pretty bad. You did, kind of hint that I have some sort of a rebuttal, not like a massive rebuttal, but it's just something that is interesting to me. Number one, at least hit on the 40-yard dash. I think that he's faster than a 4.51. I don't really know what happened. I do think that he's faster than a 4.51. If you watch his tape, he looks a lot faster than that. And even when he was getting ready to like run the 40, they were like, this guy's all about speed. I'm expecting a good number here. And then they're like a 4.55 and then a 4.51. They're like, what the heck, Tez Johnson? What happened here? So I don't know if my opinion necessarily matters all that much, but I personally, watching his tape, think that he runs a faster 40 than a 4.5. And I have seen a couple reports from like NFL scouts saying that they also kind of consider that 40 time to be a bit off because he looks faster on tape. I do think that what is good is that he looked really good in a lot of the other drills. So he had the best three cone time of the entire wide receiver group. He had the 4th best shuttle time of that whole entire group. And his 10-yard splits weren't really that bad either. Like they weren't like worst in the draft class. They were, I think, like middle of the pack. So he has insane agility. He has quickness. That is all over his film that you see everywhere. And I also feel like I kind of know that a little bit more because I watched him obliterate the crap out of Penn State just like 2 or 3 months ago. So if you want tape to just see, is Tez Johnson a somewhat decent football player? Turn on the Penn State game. That's all you need to say.
Yeah.
The last thing I will say is, I talked about that McConkey list with Matthew Golden because of the PFF markers. Tez Johnson hits on 12 of my 16 PFF markers. Is actually the 2nd highest in the class. If he is somehow drafted in round 2, he would basically get over my marker hump. I have a marker filter basically on that list of saying you have to have at least over 3 markers. He's currently at 3. And the only way that he can get over that is if he's drafted in round 2, because if you're under 3 markers, you're basically a bad prospect. But if that were to happen, he would be on that McConkey list then. He would join Lab McConkey. Javon Baker was on the list last year too, but then also Puka, Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, Hollywood Brown, Deontay Johnson, and then Deion Kane was in there too. So I'm sure he's probably going to be much more Javon Baker, much more Devon Kane, even if he somehow makes it to the 2nd round draft capital. But at least that list is something that I won't ignore if a team decides to take a shot on him still early on day 2.
Yeah, completely. And look, guys have bad combines. It happens. It does not need to fully obliterate them. Obviously, you called it, like what Tez Johnson did dramatically affected his draft stock. And I know I'm looking at your notes here. I know there's a chance he could be this year's Bucky Irving. Like
you said it. You Oregon, said people have bad combines.
Yes.
Example A. Bucky
right,
Irving.
and we talked about it. Like Bucky Irving's testing did not match the tape at Oregon whatsoever. Like again, this is where tape exists still. You can't just throw everything out. They're all things to consider. So look, if you're still in on Tez Johnson and you're just like, screw it, I'm not believing the combine. I am watching the tape and saying Tez Johnson's going to be good. I think that's fine because we've learned our lesson. Now, don't go crazy, right? If the NFL tells you he's a 6th-round pick, don't go crazy and draft him in the 1st. But take your 3rd-round flyer on him, right? That's what people did with Bucky Irving, and it pans out because it's a low-risk, high payoff bet potentially. And that's okay, right? You don't have to be so steadfast in just like, I'm never touching Tez Johnson because his speed score sucks. Like, I'm not going to do that. If he's there in the 4th round, late 3rd of rookie drafts, Tez Johnson will be on the list.
Justin, the other loser that a lot of people might think of from the combine this past year, not at the running back position, not at the wide receiver position either, at the tight end position, Harold Fannin Jr. did not have the best NFL combine. I know it was all over Twitter. Everybody's talking about, his athleticism and his RAS and everything like that, saying that it was like pretty bad. I honestly, the way I view this is I think I might just throw out the 40 with Harold Fannin. I think there's a lot of other combine metrics that he looks good in, just like Tez Johnson. I mean, he was tied for 2nd in the class in 10-yard split. He was 3rd in the shuttle in the class. He was one of 3 tight ends under a 4.4 in that drill. He was 2nd in the class in the 3-cone, one of 2 tight ends under 7 seconds there. So like all the other drills were really good. And even his 40 wasn't necessarily bad. Like a 4.71 for a tight end, not a bad time. It's just at his weight of like 241 is just not necessarily ideal. So I think personally that I think I'm just going to kind of throw out the 40. I'm going to look at his other stuff. I'm really going to look at his production and his film because I just don't necessarily think that, we're just expecting tight ends to like house every single catch that they have, like especially for fantasy, like these yard chunkers, these reception guys, like Trey McBride's a good athlete, but he's not, busting out 40, 50-yard runs all the time. He's just catching first downs, and that's what he does. That like Laporta does the same thing. Mark Andrews has lived in that for years. Travis Kelce's done that for a good chunk of his career, even the past few years when his speed is kind of gone. So I'm still in on Harold Fannin. I'm curious if you are as well.
I am. I mean, he's been tight end 3 for me in this class for some time. I'm not really shifting it. Like, yes, I think the general sentiment, some of the shine, right, wore off of him at the combine. And maybe that affects his draft stock more than it does, like his actual NFL draft stock more than it does his fantasy stock. Because, yeah, like you said, the videos that were floating around, the blocking drill, where he's turning the sled, like, okay, yes, like that's not a good visual to have. But I was texting my buddy about it, and he goes, look, if we're talking fantasy, I hope he can't block. He's like, what do I care? And like, yes, you want the guy on the field, and that's really where it ends up mattering, because if he can play all 3 downs, he plays more. That's the general sentiment. Mm-hmm. But to his same point, he's like, I'm not going to drop him because he kind of screwed up a blocking drill. He's like, that's fine. Like, again, there's plenty of players out there with his measurables that have been successful for fantasy. Plenty. So I'm not overly concerned about Fannin. Like, yeah, maybe a little bit less exciting than he felt coming into the combine, but you live and learn. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I think this is a good example of just like, don't double count the NFL combine in either direction, either positively or negatively if you're watching the film. If you watch the film of Harold Fannin, I don't think you saw the long speed, and I think you shouldn't be surprised by his 40-yard time, especially at his weight. You definitely didn't see him block. So I think you shouldn't be surprised that he didn't look good in the blocking drills either. Right. So like, yes. When you were watching Harold Fannin and you looked at his production, you looked at a player who just caught everything that was thrown to him. And if that's able to be translated over to the NFL into an offense that is going to utilize that tight end position. I mean, even if you look at somebody, if he ends up being like Jake Ferguson or Zach Ertz. Like, Zach Ertz is a really interesting comp. He ran a 4.76 under 250 pounds. People comped him to Jordan Reed on Twitter. People, the combine itself, like, threw Julius Thomas's name up there as an immediate comp for him. Like, there are successful fantasy tight ends that just don't have this otherworldly athleticism. Like, he doesn't have to be Kyle Pitts. And it's probably a good thing that he's not Kyle Pitts either, because Kyle Pitts has been largely bad for most of his career. So if he's not Kyle Pitts, it's probably a good thing. He can still succeed in the NFL. And I think maybe this just means that, you know, if it was a big 3 at the tight end position with Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, and Harold Fannin, maybe it's just Warren and Loveland, and then Fannin is a really good 3, and then we can talk about all the other guys after him.
But getting back to the wide receiver position, I want to talk about my last winner from the combine. I want to talk Jalen Royals. Now, I just put out my updated rankings. He has moved into the top 5 for me. Jalen Royals coming out of the combine was, exactly what you wanted to see. One, you saw that he was healthy from the season-ending foot injury. That's a huge step in the right direction. 2, he comes out with great size, 6 foot, 206. That's what you want. On top of that, he only runs the 40, but in that 40-yard dash, he runs a 4.42 and actually had the best 10-yard split of any wide receiver in this class at the combine. Jalen Royals is going to rise quickly, I think, up people's rookie rankings, and there's already reports that he is a top 32 prospect in this draft class for some scouts. That is exciting. Like, that is what you want. He's a player you're going to be able to grab in the second round of your rookie drafts, I think almost 100% of the time, because look, he's coming from Utah State. He didn't finish 2024, even though he was on pace for 1,400 yards. But the profile is exactly what I want from a player with that kind of draft capital in a fantasy draft. And everything he did from the combine just solidified that evaluation for me.
Yeah, I'm looking at our February DLF Superflex rookie ADP. He came in at 27 overall. So at the 303.
Yep.
I definitely think he's going to go up from that. I'm definitely looking at a lot of the names that he was behind. Even, at wide receiver 10 itself at the position. I do definitely think that he climbs from that, but I do agree with you. I think that he is just a second round rookie ADP. Like, I don't know, even if he gets first round draft capital, like you're saying, some scouts have him as, and maybe if one of the teams in the back end, like the Bills or, the Commanders still, even after trading for Debo or somebody like that, takes the shot on Jalen Royals at the end of the first round, I still don't really expect his ADP to climb drastically higher than like the early second round. I mean, maybe if he, because I just don't really think that there's like a landing spot like, Ladd McConkey going to the Chargers. Everybody was like, oh, next Keenan Allen, they don't have any wide receivers paired with Justin Herbert. I don't know if there's like a landing spot like that.
New England.
That would do it. That would.
I was like, New England's, that's the spot, I
Yeah.
think. But you're right. I mean, I don't even know if it has anything to necessarily do with Jalen Royals, but you look at the way this draft class is set up.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously have Genty and Hampton, for us, far and away, the 2 best running backs. You have Ted McMillan, you have Luther Burden, you have Emeka Egbuka. You probably still have Trey Harris, who I know people absolutely love, you being one of them. You have 2, maybe 3 tight ends. And then you have like 6 other running backs that could all be in that space. So, like, if he does ever squeak into the first, and you have 2 quarterbacks, potentially, in Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders, depending what you think of them. So, like, it is just a very busy first round because the talent feels very level in this draft class. I think that's the word. The peak is peak, and then it levels out really quickly. But Jalen Royals feels late first at best, at absolute best, but probably like early mid-second almost in every single draft this year.
And then to wrap up this whole entire video, let's end it on a high note. Let's end it with another winner here. We have I think a deeper prospect name than basically everybody else that we've talked about so far. In terms of rookie ADP from February, he was in the 4th round. But Bhayshul Tuten had a phenomenal combine. He ran a 4.32 at 206 pounds, which is a 118 speed score. So more impressive than Omarion Hampton's speed score, despite being 15 pounds lighter. And for reference, again, with that speed score, there's only been 6 running backs who have posted a 118 speed score since 2018. Saquon Barkley and Jonathan Taylor are at the top. Then Antonio Gibson, Kene Nwangwu, Isaiah Pacheco, and Isaac Guerendo. So obviously, take out Saquon, take out Jonathan Taylor. They are tremendous prospects. They got first and second round draft capital. Tuten, I don't expect to get that. But you still have a really good list of some players that are drafted either late day 2 like Antonio Gibson or even into day 3 like Pacheco and Isaac Guerendo. Gibson has had multiple RB1 seasons already, at least early in his career he did. Pacheco has at least been a value hit with some of the production in there when he's healthy. Guerendo, like I said, interesting handcuff. Nwangwu just didn't do anything. And maybe Tuten ends up like that, but I mean, I still think that he's done enough at the combine. And then when you pair it with some of the tape, like I went back and I had to watch a little bit of tape because I was like, I just didn't really dive into him all that much. And then he does that at the combine. I'm like, okay, I got to invest a little bit more time into him. He is a pretty good running back. I know he's going to be on my very short list of those running backs that I love to draft in that third or fourth round range of rookie ADPs. And honestly, I could even see him being a guy that, depending on where he lands, sneaks into the late second round of rookie drafts.
Yeah, he's going to be I think the biggest winner in terms of like fantasy production or fantasy bump that you see in rookie drafts. Because whenever there is a running back that has good size and insane speed, we naturally all just lose our minds because everybody goes to think home run threat. Home run threat, home run threat, home run threat. I don't know if this gets him into the second or third round. That's truly what I care about for the most part, especially in this class because it is so deep. Like it's going to be very difficult for him to really elevate his NFL draft stock. Like, yes, he was the talk of the town at the combine. And that's great. It's good that he has that moment. I still don't know if the tape screams day 2 running back. So if the NFL tells me I'm wrong, then I'll happily bump him up and start looking at him in the second round of rookie drafts. But from right now, I think you nailed it for me. Like he's squarely in the third, fourth round, landing spot dependent at this point.
I'm looking at this end of the third round though. Like, I mean, the fourth round, it could be anybody. Like he could end up being a handcuff to, Derrick Henry for all we know. But there are landing spots, and I'm looking at this end of the third with all these like compensatory picks and stuff. Like the New Orleans Saints are right in there if they really hate Kendre Miller a lot, and Alvin Kamara is continuing to get old. Cleveland is sitting there at 94. They don't have Nick Chubb, at least not right now. It's really only Jerome Ford. Could be in a pretty interesting spot. Minnesota, I know they want Aaron Jones back, so we'll see if he actually comes back to them in free agency or not. But if they're looking for a guy that could be, like Antonio Gibson, who was a third round pick, like I think Tuten could be on. Like they might get to the point where 8 running backs have already gone off the board in the top like 75.
Yeah.
And then if you're wanting a running back, you might have to just go and grab your guy a little bit earlier than you were expecting, because all these other guys have already been taken. So I wouldn't be shocked. Again, I'm not really expecting Tuten to land in on day 2, but I wouldn't be shocked either. And if especially to one of those landing spots, I'm especially really looking at Minnesota or Cleveland. Denver, I think, would be pretty interesting too, with Javonte probably gone. That there are a couple of those that I think would massively raise his draft stock for rookie.
Absolutely. And the thing is, though, with all those landing spots we just described, they also have to survive round 2. Like that's the thing here is that it's just such a deep class. It's such a difference from last year, where last year was like, man, you better hope you get one of the 3 running backs. like it is just, that's not the case this season. So it's going to be very interesting. But I mean, like you said, he put himself on the radar without a doubt. So we have to pay attention.